Who are the tight ends you should be targeting if you have a win now dynasty team? That is what we're talking about on today's episode. All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Dynasty.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Matt Williamson and Ryan McDowell.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. I'm your host, Ryan McDowell. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Joining me, as always, is former NFL scout Matt Williamson. Find Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Matt, how's it going today?
It's going well. As I mentioned with my first recording with Peacock and Williamson, I have to apologize because I am in the world's smallest dorm room, just surrounded by cinder block, and sound just radiates through here. So it's the best I could do at the moment. So that's where I'm at here in lovely Latrobe, PA, watching Steelers.
Listen, the inside look on the Pittsburgh Steelers and the scout's eye is why you're here. So we can deal with it for an episode as you're hanging out at Steelers camp for sure. Matt, today is Thursday. That means we have a game today. Browns Jets. We already know Deshaun Watson won't play. Pretty much nobody we really care about will play, but that's okay. We've got football to watch in just a matter of hours. I cannot wait.
No doubt. It's maybe the most anticlimactic thing in all of sports, the Hall of Fame game. But we all get excited. We fall for it every year, and it is live football.
That's right. That's right. Matt, we are continuing our series of win now trade targets. Of course, we've talked quarterback, running back, and wide receiver this week so far. We're finishing up that series today with win now tight end trade targets. And I think as I was looking over some of the names, I think this might be the easiest position to find those win now pieces.
Really?
Okay. We disagree already?
A little. I had more. I mean, it's a standalone position. There's obviously fewer tight ends and wideouts to pick from or whatever, but I didn't love my list. Bring it on. Let's go. I mean, maybe it's my affinity for the hot young tight end. I don't like the old ones.
Well, I mean, part of that is okay. So again, we're not going to tell you Travis Kelce's a win now tight end or Mark Andrews or even George Kittle. We've tried to avoid the top 12 players this week in this conversation. We'll avoid the top 5 or 6 for these tight ends. Again, you talked about the hot young tight end, your favorite
right.
favorite joke when we're talking tight ends, but there's a lot of those guys, whether it's one of the rookies, Kincaid or Laporta, you might have drafted those guys. They're both, I believe. Yeah. They're both currently tight end ones, according to DLF Dynasty ADP. So they're both being drafted among the top 12, and they sure look great on your roster in June and July and August. But come week one, when you've got to click on those names, it becomes a little tougher. Sure, I mean, they could certainly have great rookie seasons. I'm hoping they both do, and others do as well. But there's so many veterans, including some cheap ones that we'll talk about today, that can bridge that gap until those rookies, or and maybe even it's Greg Dulcich from last year, Chigo Okonkwo, another rookie last year that we're counting on.
Okay,
well, no, I didn't either. I'm saying,
oh, I got you.
No, I didn't go that young either. I'm saying if you've got those guys, you think they're your long-term answer at tight end, but they might not have that, that consistency piece, or, honestly just may not be ready to be that every week starter from a dynasty standpoint. I think there's quite a few guys, and most of them pretty inexpensive, that you can grab and plug in. That's what we're starting.
Okay.
That's what we're talking about today. So I'll let you go first, since you struggled to find some names here, or struggled to find some you liked. Give us your first guy.
Well, I will throw one little short conversation out that could turn into an hour-long podcast. But we just brushed off Kelce. I mean, again, that's a half-hour conversation. Do you really want to invest in him now if you're a win-now team or not? I just wanted to throw it out there that he's, I brought up Cooper Kupp. I brought up I brought up Eckler. I mean, he's even above those guys in terms of dominance at the position.
Right.
But maybe we'll save that for some other time. But because he's overqualified, obviously.
Yes, right. And yeah, that certainly doesn't mean don't target him if you
Right.
have a win now team. It just means that's the obvious call, especially if he is somehow on a team that is not a contender and you have a contender. You don't need us to tell you to connect those dots.
Exactly. And I think the same is true. And you mentioned this to start the show with George Kittle. But I did want to throw this out there as kind of an aside, to our buddy Scott Barrett too, because I was fiddling with fantasy points per route run, which is an awesome stat. Kelsey's number one at 0.57. So every time he runs a route, he gets you 0.57 fantasy points. Kittle's not far behind at 0.52. So maybe people think there's a bigger gap there than is truly there. Maybe you can get him at 75% of the cost of Kelsey. I just want to throw that out there because I was a little shocked by that number.
Yeah, that's a good pull for sure. And as far as the value, I think it's probably less than 75%, honestly.
Yeah,
the gap in value. Kelsey seems to be maintaining his dynasty value, whether you're looking at ADP or checking the trade value according to the trade finder at DLF. Kittle's actually losing value kind of steadily. So I think people are maybe worried about the injuries with Kittle, or just the depth that is on that team, where Kelsey is obviously locked in as his team's top target. So Kelsey, Kittle, both great to have for those win now teams. Anybody else? Who else do you have?
I think an obvious one too is Waller.
Yeah, he was the top guy on my list.
Me too, of the ones that I felt counted. So take it away. I mean, I think they'll scheme him up well. I have some doubts, though. He hasn't been super productive over the last, recent memory.
Well, I think he's been. I don't worry about the production.
Yeah.
I just worry about the injuries. Of course, that's what really essentially cost him almost his entire season last year. When he was on the field, he was still a tight end one in the majority of his games. That's what you're looking for, or at least that's what I'm looking for with these veteran tight ends, especially. Give me a tight end one game at least half the time. And most of the guys on my list today meet that criteria. At least they did last season. Waller is the tight end 8 in Dynasty, and he was a top 12 tight end in 56% of his games last year. Again, that's somewhat of a small sample size because of that injury. The Raiders felt comfortable moving on from him. And now, you look at that Giants receiving core. It's kind of become a little bit of a joke or a meme that they have invested in all these undersized slot type wide receivers and Darren Waller. So, Waller, if he doesn't lead the team in targets, in receiving, in touchdowns, I think it would be a major upset. So he's certainly primed for a huge year. He is, at his age. That's when I believe I think he's still 30. He hasn't turned 31 yet, but that's when dynasty managers start really paying attention, maybe getting a little worried, but we know those tight ends age well, at least the elite ones do. Of course, Kelsey nearing 34 years old himself. So, I could certainly see Waller having 2 or 3 good seasons left. Dynasty relevant, fantasy relevant seasons left. I love him as a trade target.
Okay. I think you make a great point, and I definitely trust the coaching staff, and it's not like they gave up nothing to get him. A third round pick is pretty substantial in this league.
Yeah. Looking at the trade finder, we talked about some of the other guys earlier in the week that the going rate seems to be a second round pick. That's what we're seeing with Waller as well. Waller for a second round pick plus Irv Smith. That's an easy accept in my opinion.
Yeah.
Here's one the other way. Waller plus a third round pick for Mike Williams. So they moved from Waller, supposedly moved up to get Mike Williams.
I wouldn't mind moving Mike Williams if I was short a tight end.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair value. Again, for one side to throw in a third. Of course, it sounds like those two managers viewed those guys as pretty equal as well. Waller and a third rounder for a future first rounder. Now, that is not a move I would make. Don't give up a first round pick for Darren Waller. Honestly, even in a tight end premium league, that's not a move that I would be making.
Yeah, for future firsts are just almost untouchable for me.
Yeah, totally agree. Another name I had on my list, a couple spots down from Waller on our ADP list, and I think this is a pretty easy call as well, Evan Ingram. He's the tight end 10 in our ADP currently. He was a wide receiver 1 in 53% of his games last year, so he meets that mark. Really had somewhat of a breakout season after a couple of frustrating years with the Giants. Of course, moves over to Jacksonville, and his best season since his rookie year of 2017, and gets the franchise tag with Jacksonville, eventually comes to an agreement on a new contract. So he'll be there for the next couple of years at least. And I love the situation for Ingram. Does obviously have quite a bit of competition when it comes to targets with Christian Kirk and now Calvin Ridley there, along with guys like Zay Jones and whatever they do out of the backfield, whether it's Travis Etienne or Tank Bigsby or someone else. So that the target competition will be tough. But I just love the talent of Ingram. I feel like we finally saw what he really can be this past season.
Okay. I didn't consider Ingram or Njoku, and I like both those guys a lot. I just kind of still looked at them as young building block pieces because tight ends last longer. So maybe that's my error, to be very honest with you, because everything you said about Ingram is dead on. I've been going back and forth and redraft and best ball. Do I prefer Ingram or Freiermuth? I like him. And I guess the best thing I could say about Ingram is I very much believe he has arrived, that this isn't fluke.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point there. Again, kind of big picture strategy. And we throw out that term win now. And maybe the assumption from a lot of people is that means you have to be focusing on those older players like Kelsey, like, Aaron Rodgers or someone, whoever might be on the older side of their specific position. Evan Ingram is 28 years old, turns 29 soon. David Njoku just turned 27.
Yeah,
so, both of those guys, if things go well in their careers and kind of things go as expected, we could be looking at another 5 years of relevancy in their career, at least. So yeah, certainly not guys towards the end of their career, but they could still be win now pieces. And I mean, honestly, a rookie or a sophomore could be a win now piece. Bijan Robinson's a win now piece. And that's why there was so much discussion on, is he if you earned the 101 and you've got a bad team, is he even the pick? Do you even want that guy on your roster?
No, I agree.
Again, that's a much bigger conversation for later. We do have some other tight ends to discuss, and we're going to do that next.
Guys, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's very, very easy to create a free post on LinkedIn Jobs. I mean, it's unbelievably simple, trust me. And then you add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. My line of work's a little odd, but boy, I would have loved to have a source like this when I was trying to break into the business. It's also why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So here's what you do. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find your qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL, all one word. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply.
Matt, before we continue talking about some specific tight ends that might help those win now dynasty teams hopefully bring home a title in 2023, I want to ask you again, kind of a big picture strategy question with the tight end position specifically. How low can we go in rankings and ADP and really feel comfortable with that guy as a starter? Because again, you look at the top 12 tight ends, according to DLF Dynasty ADP right now: Kelsey, Andrews, Pitts, Hawkinson, Kittle, Goddard, Kincaid, Waller, Freiermuth, Ingram, Dulcich, and Laporta. You've got some maybe obvious names after that. David Njoku, Chig Okonkwo are the next couple of guys. I mean, how comfortable do you feel going deep in the, in the 20s, maybe even into the 30s, when you're looking for a player that might be a starting tight end on a contending roster?
Yeah, that's a great conversation, because that's kind of like my other names for this podcast.
I was going to say, maybe that's why you had trouble finding some guys that you really felt good about.
Yeah, exactly. Because the other names I'm going to bring up, I don't feel comfortable. I'm looking at my redraft ranks right now, and I am comfortable with 10 names: Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson, Kittle, Pitts, of course, Waller, Goddard, Freiermuth, Ingram, and Chig. Kincaid, Laporta, Dulcich. I like all those guys, but week one, clicking the box for starting tight end, I'm not there yet. But I do have a couple of names still that are older that we're going to get pretty cheap, though.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I did see, I found actually just the most random stat as I was looking back at some previous ADP and some fantasy finishes, looking at the tight end 37 from each of the past 2 years. That player has finished as a top 10 fantasy tight end. So whoever was the tight end 37 in July, 1 year, last year, it was Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill was the tight end 37 in our July ADP. He finishes as a top 10 tight end. The year before that, it was, I believe it was Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz was the tight end 37. So the tight end 37 right now, Matt, maybe a guy who could finish top 10, Hayden Hurst. Maybe.
That's not crazy to me.
It's not crazy to me either. I didn't have him on my list, but hey, maybe it's some kind of fluke with this tight end 37. If Hayden Hurst finishes as a top 10 tight end this year, I'll be chasing that guy next July, whoever he might be.
That's some serious research by you, but not exactly a science that I'm going to bet every chip on. But Hayden Hurst isn't a bad call. I mean, he's not fighting much for in the way of targets.
No, I mean, obviously a crowded wide receiver room there, but we don't look at any of those guys as, or at least we don't have any clarity on who the wide receiver one is, right? I mean, Thielen's old, Chark can't stay healthy, Terrace Marshall's just never really shown anything, and then Mingo the rookie. So, I mean, you could make a case for any of those four guys, but you could also make a case that Hayden Hurst ends up seeing more than his share of targets as well. Yeah. All right, Matt, give us another name, tight end to target for those win now dynasty teams.
Yeah, again, I wouldn't say I'm thrilled to check the box on Tyler Higbee as a starter, but I referenced this fantasy points data, and of all the tight ends that ran 50 or more routes, he came in 10th. I mean, ahead of Njoku, ahead of Schultz, ahead of Ingram. I mean, he's efficient. There's 29 names on this list. He's number 10. So I think it's pretty close to being clear that he's the second target earner on his team, and he has a bit of a track record, and he's cheap as could be.
I had Higbee on my list as well. He is the tight end 22 in our DLF Dynasty ADP this month. He did not hit that 50% number that I was mentioning earlier. He was a tight end one in 35% of his games last year. But we really saw as that team dealt with some injuries, and someone pointed this out recently. We really saw the way his role changed once Cooper Kupp was injured. Once, really that entire team dealt with injuries last year, unfortunately. But they kept Higbee into blocks so much more as the season went along. So I mean, you look at his first 4 or 5 games of the season, multiple tight end 1 games in that period, and then really fell off as the season wore on. So I think ideally Higbee is much more involved as a pass catcher rather than a blocker. And like you said, he's certainly in the running, in the conversation, to be the second target on that team behind Cooper Kupp, who's now dealing with a training camp injury. So again, things looking a little rough for the Rams to get started, but maybe, unfortunately, some good news for Tyler Higbee. Next guy I had on my list was, I believe, Higbee's former teammate, if I'm remembering correctly. It's Gerald Everett, the other LA tight end of the LA Chargers. Tight end 27, 44% of the time last season. He was a tight end 1. Another player that is dealing with a lot of competition when it comes to looking for targets on that Chargers roster. Of course, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Now they bring in Quentin Johnston. What they didn't bring in, though, was another tight end of note or of relevance. There was a lot of predictions, a lot of mock drafts that had the Chargers taking a rookie tight end, and Gerald Everett escaped that and pretty much has that job to himself. So I love that. We talked earlier in the week about the Chargers as one of those teams we want pieces of. Gerald Everett is pretty much the cheapest way to get access to that Chargers offense. What do you think about the Everett call?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, he qualified as a hot young tight end for a long stretch. I've owned him everywhere. I've stuck with him. I see a lot of ability, although there's certainly inconsistencies with his game, and he's not much of a blocker, which sometimes coaches don't love. But yeah, I mean, having Herbert throw to him in that system, I think, could be really good. And the new OC, Moore.
Yeah, Kellen Moore.
Just got a lot out of Dalton Schultz, who I think is clearly less talented than Everett.
Yeah, and I think that might be the last thing you mentioned there with Kellen Moore and what he's gotten out of tight ends. I think that might be what's really pushing people towards Everett. Yet in Dynasty, whether it's because of his age or because of that target competition, his price has remained very inexpensive. The ADP hasn't gone up much at all. The Trade Finder shows us that he's being either treated as a throw-in in a larger deal, which is to be expected, or being flipped for a third rounder. I did see a deal on here, and this is the second time I've mentioned this name, so I want to ask you what you think about him. Gerald Everett for Irv Smith, straight up. So Irv Smith, another guy that certainly is a former hot young tight end, one of your favorites, former day 2 pick of the Vikings. I would say flashed in Minnesota, but never really was able to stay healthy, honestly. So another guy that we feel pretty good about the talent. We just don't know if he can actually stay on the field. Of course, now he's with Cincinnati. He's pretty much the only option they have as a possible pass catcher from that tight end position. Is he a guy that would show up on your list, a list like this, or more of a dart throw range?
No, I think he's very comparable to Everett, and he came in the league very, very young. He's had obvious impediments that aren't his fault necessarily. I can't stress this enough with tight ends that don't give up on them. I mean, even Evan Ingram was a first round pick, which is rare, and took him several years to hit his stride. Could Smith in Cincinnati be similar? I don't think that's insane. Everett and Smith are guys I own a lot. They've been roster cloggers up until this point, but I'm not moving on from them.
Yeah, that's fair. Irv Smith is the tight end 21 in our ADP, still just 24 years old. He will turn 25 very soon. Matt, we've got a couple more guys I want to ask you about. We'll do that right after this.
Yeah, I got a dark horse for you too, but August is here, and you know what that means. I mean, it's officially the start of fantasy football drafting month. I mean, no doubt. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out Best Ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you do is one live snake draft, no waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every week. It's so easy. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back and even bigger with $15 million of total prizes up for grab. $15 million. including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July. So don't wait around. Get on this. Visit underdogfantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with the promo code Locked On, all one word. You get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog fantasy code Locked On. I already did this. Underdog is the easiest place to play fantasy football and the best place for best ball. Best Ball Mania 4 is the largest fantasy football tournament ever. The winner of Best Ball Mania 3 drafted their team in July. So again, let's get on this. And frankly, I get a notification on my phone 10 times a day that it's my turn to draft on Underdog, and it's great. And it's very simple. I probably have 12 to 15 teams already in there and using this promo code. Trust me, it's easy. It's fun. You really get a jump up on your competition, for redraft stuff coming up. And you can also invite your fans to a private draft in order to bring new users. We can bring them on too. So check it out right now.
All right, we're back to finish the tight end conversation. Win now, tight ends. You said you had a dark horse for us, Matt. Let's hear it.
Yeah, he might be free. I mean, he's 31 years old, but I think Jordan Akins is a talented player that was in a bad situation for much of his career. He's a Brown now, if people don't realize that. But a lot of it goes, I keep referencing this fantasy points data. He ended up tied with Dallas Goedert in fantasy points per route run, only behind Kelsey, Kittle, and Andrews. Like, he's a good receiving threat. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to invest anything in this guy. Just throw him on the back of your roster.
Yeah, certainly cheap. You won't be surprised to find out he does not have an ADP at DLF. He's going undrafted in those drafts. I like the call. I have liked the talent of the player when he was in Houston. I don't know. Cleveland's tough, though. Right? Njoku's there. Harrison Bryant, I still like a little bit, although that kind of seems to be fading, especially as they brought in Jordan Akins. So I don't mind it, certainly for the price, if you have the room on your roster. I asked you earlier, how low can we go in finding these win now tight ends? And this is the reason, because I see 3 guys on our ADP that are currently tight end 30 or later. All of them are at least 28 years old. So as we wrap up here today, just give me a yes or a no. Do you trust these guys as starters this season? Zach Ertz, tight end 30, 32 years old, and coming off an injury.
I know I'm supposed to say yes or no, but if we get good injury news, he's going to get targets. So probably.
Okay. Taysom Hill, the name we mentioned earlier, tight end 35, 32 years old, not even really a tight end. We know that, but that's the designation. He was a tight end 1 last year and caught single-digit passes, I believe. So whatever you want to call him or label him, is he a guy you would be targeting to help you win this year?
I would say he's not for me. They now have 3 running backs that look like quality players. I can't see Carr coming out of the game all that much. I really like Shaheed. I want to see him on the field more. I like Jennings a lot. Some of the guys that don't get a lot of publicity in New Orleans, I would rather see on the field than Hill. And maybe the coaches don't agree, but I'm not big on Taysom Hill.
All right, last one. We'll wrap it up with this. Hey, I almost said Hayden Hurst.
Oh,
Hunter Henry, tight end 36, of course, of the Patriots, 28 years old, way down there. Lots of good camp buzz. I know you're only hearing Steelers news up there, but lots of good buzz on Hunter Henry. Yes or no on Hunter Henry?
I lean towards no. I expected so much more from him, but his target competition isn't bad. It'd be hard to move if you had him. You don't cut him. But as a throw-in on a deal, maybe. Yeah. Then he's clogging your roster,
Yeah, I get it. Well, thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Every dayers, check back tomorrow as Kate and Marcus wrap up the week. I'm sure they'll be talking about that game that we'll be watching here very soon. That will do it for today's show. Please make sure you download and subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Remember to follow the show at Locked On Dynasty. Follow Matt at Williamson NFL. And I'm Ryan, MC23. We'll be back next time with more Locked On Dynasty.